The 19th century French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte purportedly once called China a sleeping lion. Let her sleep, he warned, for when she wakes, she will shake the world. 200 years later, in 2014, the new Chinese president Xi Jinping was invited to Paris, and he referenced that quote from Napoleon.
拿破仑说过
Today, this lion has awakened, he said, but it is peaceful, civilized, and friendly. Though some would beg to differ.
For years, China has had complete impunity on the world stage, even as its human rights record, despite its rhetoric, was worsening.
For decades, many in the West hoped China would grow into a trusted ally, perhaps even a democracy. Instead, an emboldened Beijing is accused of doubling down on authoritarianism and cracking down on human rights. And Canadians are caught in the crossfire.
There are two innocent Canadian men who would want nothing more than to come home.
The two Michaels, Kovrig and Spavor, detained in China since December 2018, have garnered international attention and galvanized Canadians and their allies.
Human beings are not bartering chips. We're going to work together until we get their safe return.
When Michael Kovrig's wife heard the U.S. president address the case in February, she was filled with hope.
Hearing President Biden say those words was really emotional. Having him refer to Michael and to Michael Spavor by name, to call for their release was moving.
But in the fight to free the two Michaels, another name has been notably absent.
Where's the Hussein's case? Why they don't want to bring it up? Why they don't want to raise it?
Kamila Talindibayeva can't even flip through her family photo album without breaking down.
When I look, it is so hard. It's so difficult.
Memories of her four boys growing up in Burlington, west of Toronto. Christmases, birthdays, and graduation ceremonies.
When I see them, I'm very proud, but something is missing. The main person is missing in the family. That hurts a lot.
She and her husband, Huseyin Celil, are Uyghur Muslims who fled persecution in China 20 years ago. Celil was an imam, an outspoken advocate for Uyghur rights. He'd been imprisoned in China before for using a megaphone to broadcast a call to prayer. In 2001, Celil was granted refugee status, and he and his wife started a new life in Canada, becoming Canadian citizens. But he never stopped fighting for the Uyghur people.
He was attending the protests front of the Chinese consul.
In 2006, the family traveled to Uzbekistan on their Canadian passports to visit Kamila's family. Without warning, Uzbek police arrived at the house and asked Celil to come to the station where he was arrested.
We didn't have any idea, what's going on. I was shocked.
Kamila called her friends back home in Canada. One of them knew a lawyer named Chris McLeod.
They said, what do we do? Can you help? I said, well, no problem.
McLeod is a commercial litigator by trade and had never handled any human rights cases.
Yeah, I just thought we'd phone Global Affairs on their 1-800-24-hour number. An urgent message would be relayed to the relevant embassy. They would send somebody out to clear the air and have him released.
But Canada didn't have a consulate in Uzbekistan, and another country was quietly pulling the strings.
I started getting calls from people saying, Chris, this isn't about Uzbekistan, it's China that wants Hussein.
They were right. Uzbekistan had arrested Celil at the request of the Chinese. A few months later, despite Canada's demand he be released, he was sent to China. Accused of being a separatist and a terrorist, Celil was sentenced to life in prison.
I cry every day, like 3-4 times when I think about this case, when I think about my husband.
China refused to allow Canadian officials to even visit Celil in prison. So in 2009, the Canadian government called a lifeline. Hello, John.
Well, hello.
American John Cam has spent the past 30 years fighting to free China's political prisoners. His shelves are stacked with binders full of case notes and letters, both to and from Chinese officials.
Here's a response in writing.
His nonprofit manages the world's largest database of past and present political prisoners in China, containing more than 45,000 names. The former Hong Kong businessman patiently works within the confines of China's opaque judicial system, formally submitting prisoner lists for consideration.
The Chinese are very patient. You have to be even more patient. And more important than patience is persistence. You have to keep pushing.
Pushing, but never pushy. The tone of his letters is always respectful and complimentary, and his approach has proved effective. Over the years, Cam has helped to secure clemency for hundreds of political prisoners, but those victories have become increasingly rare.
It's a bit difficult, more than a bit difficult these days. Relations are quite tense. The Chinese government is not as concerned as it once was with its image around the world, which at the moment is quite bad, but they're not as concerned about it.
Since Prime Minister Harper asked for Cam's help in 2009, he's lobbied for Celil countless times. In 2016, Celil's sentence was reduced from life to 20 years.
But there have not been further sentence reductions to date. So I'm working on that. Never give up.
Cam points to the case of Canadians Julia and Kevin Garrett.
That's the first place we lived, I think.
The Christian aid workers lived in China for 30 years before their arrest in 2014. Their case is eerily similar to the two Michaels, accused of spying following the arrest of a Chinese national in Canada. The couple endured months of solitary confinement, interrogated for 6 hours every day.
I remember during those first couple months, 2 or 3 months of interrogation, they threatened execution many times.
After 7 months, Julia was released, but Kevin was convicted of spying in a country with a conviction rate of 99%. Just when it seemed his fate was sealed, the Chinese national, whose arrest in Canada had led to the Garrett's imprisonment, suddenly pleaded guilty to spying.
The Chinese were taken by surprise.
Canada's then ambassador in Beijing, Guy Saint-Jacques, says relations with China were also looking up. Prime Minister Trudeau visited China in August 2016, amid talk of a possible free trade deal.
We said we have to use this as a lever to bring closure to this case.
And they did. 2 weeks after Trudeau's visit, Kevin was released, reunited with Julia and their children at Vancouver's airport, after 775 days in prison.
He is my youngest one. He hasn't seen his dad.
Celil's family hoped he might be next in line, but his situation was about to get even worse.
China handled hundreds of Muslims held in a network of internment camps.
In 2016, Beijing accelerated its crackdown on China's Uyghur minority, accused of corralling more than 1 million Chinese Muslims into prisons and labor camps. China calls it a de-radicalization program.
All those in favor of the amendment.
In February, the House of Commons concluded what Celil and human rights activists had been saying for years. China's mistreatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang province amounts to genocide. But Prime Minister Trudeau and most of his cabinet abstained from that vote, and there's been no movement or any mention of Celil's case.
Could you share a little bit about your engagement on the Celil case? On the what? The Celil case.
Last year, Canada's ambassador to China seemed unaware that Celil was even Canadian.
Basically, because he's not a Canadian citizenship, we are not allowed to provide. We aren't able to get access to him on our consular services side. We've tried, because he's someone I would like to see. I know it's been a long-standing file, but
yeah, Mr. Celil actually is a Canadian citizen.
But Celil's Canadian citizenship is irrelevant to the Chinese government, which doesn't recognize dual nationality. More than 100 Canadians are detained in China, many of whom are dual nationals, their names rarely mentioned by Canadian officials.
And we just don't see their cases rise to the top of the list. And it's impossible to deny that to a certain degree there's an aspect of racism that underlies that. And I think that's very troubling.
Alex Neve was the Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada for 2 decades, but has never seen a case like Celil's, imprisoned for so long without a single consular visit.
I think Huseyin Celil's case is absolutely one of the most egregious, if not right now the most egregious instance of long-term imprisonment of a Canadian citizen on completely unjust grounds.
But Neve also sees an opportunity. Western countries, including the United States, are now openly accusing China of genocide over its treatment of Uyghurs and condemning its so-called hostage diplomacy as Beijing prepares to host next year's Olympic Games.
Now the world knows, they open their eyes.
Since the day Celil was arrested 15 years ago, Camilla has had no contact, no letters, not even sure if he's still alive. She was pregnant at the time of his arrest. Their youngest son, Zubair, is now 14 and has never met his father.
When they were little, they were asking every day, they were asking why he's in China. I went through so many difficult times. Now when I see them, how they are preparing themselves to university, it's amazing, you know, it's amazing, you know, I'm proud, but something is missing. Something is missing in my life, you know. I really need Canadian people to help this case, you know, to raise these cases. I don't want to be forgotten this case.